Hello again, I am Blunty. This right here is the cheapest lens on Amazon. See, last week I had a hankering for some photographing, but instead of grabbing... Why with the rhymes? Too many. Instead of grabbing one of my camera bodies and heading out into the world, I wanted something new to play with, and by extension something I could make a video about, because I know a lot of you out there miss the photography videos, and I am trying to bring them back a little more often. What do you think about that? So, I hit up Amazon's lens category, I rolled the dice by sorting by price, and ordered the cheapest native mount lens that I saw, and it was a disaster. It was a beautiful, quirky disaster, but let's just say I got what I paid for. Hang on to your eyeballs, folks, this one gets interesting. Now, before some joyless neckbeard tries to, well, actually, me in the comments section, I did skip past some cheaper lenses, and yes, there are cheaper lenses, but they were adapted options, not native mount, and they were the little C-mount CCTV lenses, and I skipped them because I already have some of those. They're not new to me, and I've already made videos on them, by the way, linked below if you want to check those out. So this is the Lightdown 35mm f1.7 APS-C E-mount prime lens. Fully manual, of course it is at this price, one of my preferred focal lengths, and with a big wide aperture for that buttery background blur goodness. The build is surprisingly good. Metal body, believe it or not, smooth operation of the focus ring, and in particular interest to those of us who shoot video, a smooth and stepless ring for the 9-bladed aperture. And it even comes with a decent enough hard case. I mean, at this price, you're lucky enough to get a plastic bag. Maybe one of those little vinyl bags. But a hard case? It's not bad at all. The optical design has 6 elements in 5 groups, 2 aspherical lenses and 1 high refractive lens, and something they call the Ultra Multi-Coating, apparently to minimize aberration and unnecessary light dispersion. We will come back to that in just a minute because, well, guess how that works. Now this is an E-mount lens, which means I had to pull the one and only Sony E-mount camera body I have out of the box of loneliness where all my nearly never used camera gear goes. See, the Sony Alpha NEX5R was one of the earlier stabs from Sony in their then still very young E-mount and NEX system mirrorless cameras, all the way back in 2012 as a matter of fact, and I hated it. I still hate it. I mean, I loved that it was one of the earliest Sony cameras with their superb focus peaking feature, which makes manual focusing an absolute breeze, and I'm very happy to see that has bled through most of the rest of the industry. Lots of different camera manufacturers use a similar system now. Hooray! But it also had catastrophic battery life, an atrociously clumsy and hateful menu system, a screen you could barely see outside, even in dappled sunlight, and one of the worst kit lenses I have ever used in my entire history of putting my hands on cameras and pointing them at things and going click. A lens whose electronics somehow, by the way, broke down while in storage. So now this $55 lens is my only working E-mount lens for my only working E-mount camera body, which I hate using anyway. So, and if that sounds like a recipe for fun, well, you'd be right, because half the fun of a photo walk is running with a challenge. Either gear of limited capacity or ability, or with some kind of shot list limitation, like only red objects or only animals in motion. And if you've never gone on a photo walk with a challenge like that, you should try it. It's a bunch of fun. However, the challenge I was presented with here went one step further than a super cheap lens on a camera body I don't like using, because this $55 worth of lens wasn't even calibrated properly. The focus was entirely balked. I mean, the focus worked in that I could spin the focus ring around and the focus would move back and forth, but it was utterly unable to focus to infinity. And even at its maximum possible focus range, the focus point was a mere 3 meters or so in front of the lens. So that kind of ruled out landscape shots by and large, and the only thing I was left with option-wise was close-up work on small subjects that would fit within the frame of the field of view, which is equivalent to a 52mm lens in full-frame terms, because of course the NEX system, which later evolved into the much more well-received A5000 and A6000 series cameras, is an APS-C sensor size. So when I could get a subject of the right size and at the right distance to actually focus on properly, and when I actually nailed the manual focus, this cheapy lens was actually very pleasing. Decent sharpness in the center of the frame, at least considering most people share and view shots on social media these days, usually on their little phone screens, and this is more than acceptable sharpness of the subject for that kind of fun time use. The bokeh and the background blur is that often sought after in fun-time gimmick lenses and by people looking for a different look than the silky goodness of proper, serious lenses, is that slightly swirly effect, with some slight lozenge shape to the bokeh balls near the edges of the frame, and when used with some deliberate care, this effect can be a great way to draw the viewer's eye to the subject and frame it in a nicely dreamy way. I do wish I'd gone out with someone I could take some portraits with. But even doing some landscape, despite not being able to focus on the landscape at all, it can still lead to a pleasant image as well. Perhaps nice for a non-distracting desktop background for your computer, or indeed phone wallpaper. What do you reckon? I kind of like these shots for that kind of idea. Rather surprisingly, chromatic aberration and color fringing and other such oddities were pretty well controlled. Although the lens flare can be, let's use the word aggressive. That super duper ultra multi-coating thing, whatever they called it, is not doing a particularly good job at stopping light bouncing wildly around inside the lens before it eventually gets to the sensor. And it's not what I call a practical vlogging or interview lens, as the focal length, of course, the manual focus, the focus issues on my copy in particular make it less than ideal. But for some B-roll stuff, for some behind-the-scenes shots, for some product shots and things like that, I really could genuinely see me getting some use out of it for that kind of stuff. And I quite like it for low-light indoor close-up shots of things too. The swirly bokeh and slightly soft look, and in video mode alongside the utter lack of stabilization, all lead to a very specific and particular look, and I don't hate that. In fact, I kinda dig it. Now, chances are, if you order one of these for yourself, if you roll those dice, chances are you won't get a copy with the Infinity Focus issues of mine, but of course there is a chance you could, or some other weird issue, so be prepared to either have a much more, let's say a much more specialized lens than you had expected to get, or you could always send it back for exchange or refund. I mean, it is Amazon, so that should be pretty straightforward. But everything else should be similar. The look of the bokeh, the surprisingly decent feeling build of the aluminium body, and the smooth operating rings. It might very well be worth taking a stab at if you've got a desire for something different, something interesting, something unique, something quirky for your toolkit. And as for me, as much of a pain in the ass as having to use the NEX5R was, and I do still hate that thing, it's just not a very good camera body, and the seemingly joy-ruining disaster of the focus being so badly calibrated, I did still rather enjoy using it. Like I said in the opening, limitations and challenges are fun. It's a really nice way to clear the mind. It can be almost meditative for me. It's also good to dust away some of the creative blocks you may be dealing with and just have a bit of fun. It's kind of in the same category for me as a fisheye wide-angle lens. It's not very practical most of the time, but sometimes you just want to dig it out, go shoot some stuff, have some fun, do something different, do something interesting, do something with a very particular aesthetic and look to it, and that's where this lens kind of falls for me, and that's why I think I'm gonna keep it. Thanks for watching. I am Blunty, and I will catch you next time.